When the James Webb Space Telescope took off on Christmas Day 2021, pretty much the whole world was watching. We were all tracking its month-long trip out to its lonely orbit 1.5 million kilometers away. But that's not the journey we're talking about today. Nope, we're going to look at the mission that happened right here on planet Earth, a journey that was, in a lot of ways, even crazier. All right, let's get into it.
First things first, let's just let that number sink in. $10 billion. That's the price tag on the object at the center of our story. After decades of work, this wasn't just some fancy piece of equipment. It was one of the most precious, complex things humanity had ever built. And it had to be moved. And this quote right here, it just hits the nail on the head. Because before Webb could ever dream of seeing distant galaxies, it first had to survive an insane series of challenges right here on the ground. The risks were so astronomical that the fact that it even got off the ground, well, it really was nothing short of a miracle. So how did this thing end up with a $10 billion price tag and this miracle status? Well, that wasn't exactly the plan. To really get a feel for the insane pressure everyone was under, we got to go back and look at the long, complicated road it took just to get this thing to the starting line. Okay, so check this out. It all started way back in 1996. The plan was a 2007 launch and a budget of just $500 million. Sounds reasonable, right? Well, then came a huge redesign. A critical sun shield ripped during a test. At one point, the U.S. Congress almost canceled the whole thing. All of those delays and disasters pushed the final launch to 2021 and blew the budget up to that $10 billion figure. So you can imagine the pressure. Do not mess up the final step.
And, before the telescope was even a single assembled piece, its most famous feature, that gorgeous, giant golden mirror, had to go on its own epic adventure. This wasn't something they built in one factory. Oh no, this was a nationwide quest.
So why was this mirror such a big deal? It really comes down to size versus weight. To put it in perspective, it's about 3 times bigger than Hubble's mirror, but it weighs way, way less. So how'd they pull that off? The secret ingredient was a rare metal called beryllium. It's incredibly strong, but also ridiculously lightweight. It was a total game changer of an idea, but it also made the process of actually building it unbelievably complicated.
And when I say complicated, just look at this. It took 17 years just to make the mirror. They started by mining the raw beryllium from a mine in Utah. Then it was shipped to Alabama to be shaped. Then all the way over to California to be polished to perfection. After that, it went to New Jersey for its iconic gold coating, and finally to Maryland to be assembled. A 14-stop odyssey across the country for just one part of the telescope. Absolutely wild. So after all that painstaking work, after decades, the telescope is finally built and sitting in a clean room in California. Great. But now for the really hard part. How do you move this priceless, incredibly fragile instrument 9,000 kilometers to its launch site in French Guiana? You can't exactly just put it in a box and call a moving company. And here's why. The instruments on Webb are so unbelievably sensitive that a single fingerprint, or even just one tiny speck of dust, could cause catastrophic failure. The level of clean they needed to maintain, it's honestly hard to wrap your head around it. So what was NASA's solution? They built this. It's called the STARS container. And let me tell you, this is not your average shipping container. It's basically a mobile, state-of-the-art clean room, a high-tech cocoon built for one reason and one reason only, to keep the Webb telescope safe. And when I say clean, I mean obsessively, ridiculously clean. Inside that container, there could be no more than 100 microscopic particles. That's it. They literally took a UV light to every single nut and bolt to check for contaminants. Then they had to carefully fold the entire telescope up, kind of like a giant piece of origami, and place it inside. Just packing it up took them almost an entire month. Okay, so the telescope is finally packed up and ready to go. Time for the first leg of its journey, a short 41-kilometer drive from the factory to a nearby port. Sounds easy, right? Well, this little road trip was actually one of the most dangerous parts of the entire mission. I mean, seriously, just try to imagine the logistics of this. How do you possibly navigate the streets, the traffic, the potholes of a huge city like Los Angeles with the world's most valuable and delicate object in the back of your truck? It's a total nightmare scenario. Well, here's how you do it. You plan for absolutely everything. The team used satellite images to inspect every single inch of the route. They sent crews out to fill every pothole. They literally had to lift traffic lights up out of the way. The whole convoy moved in the dead of night,
crawling along at just 8 kilometers an hour, with police escorts and a whole fleet of support vehicles. It must have been an incredible thing to see.
So, Webb survived its midnight drive and made it to the port, but the journey was far from over. Now it had to endure a 16-day voyage across the ocean all the way to South America.
And you better believe that meticulous planning didn't stop at the water's edge. The container had to stay almost perfectly level, so they couldn't risk hitting any rough patches. NASA actually worked with the ship's crew to chart a custom course through the Panama Canal and the Caribbean, intentionally hunting for the calmest possible waters. They were basically weather forecasters trying to give the telescope the smoothest ride imaginable.
So there you have it. From a mine in Utah to a launch pad in French Guiana, this was the journey before the journey. It was this incredible multi-decade mission right here on Earth that made the mission in space even possible. Every breathtaking discovery Webb sends back is built on top of this unseen foundation of pure dedication and logistical genius.
And it really leaves you with this one big thought. If humanity can pull together this much brain power, this much meticulous planning, and this much sheer ingenuity just to move an object from one part of our planet to another, what unbelievable wonders is that same object going to show us now that it's finally looking out into the universe?